So the question that came up was about whether the practice would have the same intensity if we were to have perfect conditions, perfect health, perfect world, perfect political systems, um, social, economic, basically a different world than the one that we have now. How would that reflect on one's practice? In a very latent way, behind the scenes, we all want to live in comfort. We all want to be at peace. We all want to not have to struggle. Because already we're struggling, whether we like it or not, just by being alive. Even if we were to live healthy, etc., we know down the line, those people that we love, we're going to slowly lose them. As well as our health. Sooner or later we're going to develop maybe cavities in the teeth. The joints won't work as much. Memory might fail. Alzheimer's, etc. in the world. Meanwhile, there's this incredible effort to maintain the health of the planet, maintain the species from going extinct, global warming, your loved ones, to kind of freeze frame, to get them not to age. I used to do that a lot with my parents in my head, making these secret arrangements back when I was, in Christianity, and the fear of losing my parents, I was conversing with God all the time as a 12-year-old. I read the Bible twice, at least, by the time I was 50. And all for the effort that I wanted to appease this invisible entity. Why though? This was a child of a child who, in the ages of, between 12 and 15. So I was trying to make these secret contracts so that my parents won't die. At least not for another 20 years. Because for me, 20 years was like out there. It was impossible for me to even, come on. By that time, are you kidding me? The world would have changed, etc., etc. Mind of a child. But that doesn't necessarily change much. Because we're dealing with not necessarily just with the mind of a child, but also the desires we have. The fear, specifically, of not wanting to lose the things that we want to keep. Relationships, health, the world, etc. Meanwhile, we know they're slipping through our fingers all the time, and there's no way to stop it, and that's the nature of things. So on top of this, we are currently dealing with a major world crisis of so many bad things happening, so many, there's this great reset, so-called great reset, for whom? The owners of the planet, you could say, not for the rest of us. Where the average person, which is actually the 99% of us now, only the small minority, the top rich people, the ones who control the world, are making it harder for the rest of us, in a sense. So we have all kinds of debacles to deal with, all by ourselves. And fear is rampant on every level. Meanwhile, we're being pushed into a corner in every way, fashion, and form. So we're getting desperate. The tendency then becomes immediately, the automatic or the default mode would come in and say, I want a better world. I want to have safety. I want to have this. I want to have, all of which are legitimate. And we need to have, like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to have security. We need to have all these wonderful things that are necessary. They're not out there. They're not just incredibly like luxuries. They're not. Basic shelter, food to sustain oneself, a good social support system, emotional support system, a level of education to understand, healthy education, which we don't have in the world. So that's missing. So it's therefore natural for a human being today to seek those things that are missing. And they're slipping through our fingers. They're being stolen from us. Okay? That's why I was mentioning to you earlier how this is unprecedented. This current affair on a global level, where the humanity is being hijacked, is we're being taken back to being serfs, slaves. That's what where we're going as a population. The slogan that they're pushing for is like, you will own nothing and you will be happy about it. I'm wondering if we're not going to own anything. And I'm a Buddhist monk, it doesn't make a difference for me. I own nothing anyhow. But for the rest of the planet, if you're not going to own anything and be happy, somebody's going to own what you own. Somebody's going to be owning something, and they will definitely be happy. So, all these lies that people are just surrounded by, and they don't even have the voice, apparently, to speak up, to stand up. But all this is creating such tremendous pain and suffering and strife, psychologically, emotionally, mentally, physically. So it's like we've been taking back not just a few centuries, but like thousands of years, where it's worse than feudal systems. That's where we're headed, apparently. This is what I'm seeing happening. So it's natural for the person to want to have the opposite of that. Okay? To have the comfort, the safety, all these things, which are inherent, like rights. We need to have freedom, which we don't. Freedom to think, at least. That's being taken away. Freedom to say what you feel like saying, especially when it's valid, based on history, based on true understanding, not what the mass media is saying and what the majority of the Marxist collectivistic ways of thinking today is exercising its totalitarian views to kind of push us, to silence us from saying what needs to be said. This creates an added, a very lethal form of tension. It's almost like self-imploding type. This is going to then take us to a deeper level of depression, which has already. I see it in individuals that come to me. Okay. So how are those the Dhamma fall into this? How does the Buddha's teachings fall into this? How can we make the most of it? Because the Dhamma is known for its incredible ability to be versatile in any kind of situation. Any kind. So long as we're inhabiting human bodies, human forms, we have the potential to make the most of it. Yes. Despite all that I said. Now, what do I mean by this? If we were to have the perfect world, not the one that we have now, what does that leave us with? As far as, for example, the need to look at life, the fabric of life, the way we live, the way we lead, the way we choose our thoughts, our words, or our actions. We wouldn't spend much time on it, thinking about it. We wouldn't, because there's not going to be any need, unless every so often you lose somebody, or you find yourself in the hospital and you kind of need to kind of fall back on this insurance policy. And you start looking through the religion or spiritual practice to kind of gain meaning, because obviously the physical world is not supplying you with that sense of safety. At least then. So sooner or later we're going to be hit with that, even in a perfect world. Because things don't last. Okay. So do we need to have a word like this in order for us to practice? Absolutely not. That's not what the Buddha was teaching. However, the Buddha was teaching the need for us to bring up the sense of urgency. The sense of urgency. And this is where the world can be extremely useful for the practice, the way it is now, with all these injustices, all the inequities, all the greed and the lust for power and to dominate, to get rid of populations, to control the resources of the planet, as if they're going to take a dime with them to the grave, these owners of this planet. Samvega is the word that the Buddha used, urgency. Wisdom can teach us, once we apply it properly, can teach us to make the most of this situation, to propel us, push us further and faster, to really advance in the practice than we would have been able to, let's say, if the world was just like, green fields of a Swiss Alps or something, and you're living in a beautiful cottage and your food is there and you're drinking, I don't know, delicious milk every single morning. You're having fun. You're like, running around the green fields, enjoying the blue skies and singing to yourself with the sound of music, That would be another life that was wasted as far as the Dhamma is concerned. Why? Because the person would not feel the need to practice. Now we have to practice. If there has been a time where people need to be compelled to practice, this would be it. When we were discussing earlier, I was reminded of Tissa. Tissa was a rich, wealthy Brahmin at the time of the Buddha. And one day he becomes so disenchanted and with the wealth that he has, and he learns of the Dhamma, and he sees that the only way for him to really gain satisfaction out of life is for him to practice and attain arahanthood, arahantship, which is the ultimate, becoming enlightened, awakened. So what he does is he takes all his wealth and he gives it to his son. He has a son who's married. So he gives all the wealth, all the belongings, all the properties, everything, and he gives it to him. And he goes to the forest to practice. So he becomes a bhikkhu, a monk, a Buddhist monk. So he goes into the forest so he can practice. His daughter-in-law, the wife of his son, she starts scratching her head, and she's like, all of a sudden, like, it's day and night. That's the difference, meaning she's so wealthy, she's as wealthy as a queen. So she wants to keep all that and make sure that she can lock it in. She wants to make sure it's guaranteed that they will own that money, that wealth, that prestige for the rest of their lives. Because she starts to think, what if my father-in-law does not become an arahant, and he becomes disillusioned, and he leaves the order, being a monk, and he puts on the lay clothes, takes off his robes, and he becomes and joins back society. What if he does that? That means we're going to lose everything. Oh my, we can't have that. So she arranges with a few people this plan. She works out this plan, and she hires 3 or 4 murderers to go ahead and kill her father-in-law. So they're good to go. So there's no way that he's going to leave the the forest and return and lose the money. I mean, she's going to lose the money. So these guys go and they find him in the forest. And they say, hey, we're here. Actually, your daughter-in-law sent us. What kind of news do you know, it's kind of shocking, right? What does Tissa the elder do, you think? He says to them, you've come a long way. And I understand it's a considerable amount of money that she gave you. I'm just a monk, as you can see. I have nothing. I gave all my wealth to them. But, he says, I also know that you guys are going to respect your word. Meaning you're not going to go back until you've killed me. He implores them. He just asks them, pleads with them, says, please, give me at least one night. Just one more night in the forest so that I can really, really, really push myself. So that I can become an arahant. Well, they scratch their heads and they say, well, I don't know, we never had this situation before, so what if tonight while we're sleeping here, waiting for you to do what you're going to do, you run away? What makes you, what guarantees do we have? He says, don't worry, I got this covered. He says, can I have that rock over there? Because they're threatening to kill him, like with the swords pulled, and they're going to cut his head and kill him. They say, sure, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm just going to break my legs. They look at each other just like that, the way you're looking. And they say, okay. He picks up this rock, huge rock, and he smashes both his legs. He says, I want to make sure that you know that I don't intend to move until I become an arahant. Now they have a renewed respect towards this man, their future victim. Long story short, he creates enough of an urgency for himself because he knows he's going to be killed. They're going to slit his throat by, at sunrise. And he has no way of getting any help, of course. That's like, he's an old man already. He's lived his life in a sense. But he has not reached his goal for which he was born. This became the opportunity to create that sense of urgency in him to push himself. And he becomes an arahant, by the way. Now, it's a powerful image, right? Smashing your own legs, your own knees, to make sure you're not going to go. To add more intensity to this terrible predicament that you're in, this person was in. Our situation might not look like it is that bad, but it sure looks like it's getting there exponentially. Not to kind of give a doom and gloom image, but if you've been living on this planet for the last 50 years or so, and you've seen how it's moving in a certain direction, despite what's being said on mass media and what people are saying, there's that saying, the phrase, trust the behavior, not the words. Sooner or later, people are going to have to stop being so dumb and use their common sense and really look at what actions are being committed by these world leaders, these people that they trust, and all these, because they're all the same anyhow. But that should not be ultimately our concern. Everybody has to deal with their own karmic consequences. So our job should not be to criticize these people. Let me just say that too. Because it's so easy, it's a slippery slope for us to kind of be going down that road and say, oh, this person is the one who's at fault, this committee, this group, these groups that are deciding the future of the planet, etc. It's good to be aware of them. It's good to be up to speed with what's happening, yes, but ultimately the objective is not to go after them in a sense. It's to make the most of our lives here. Because we do far worse things to ourselves, especially our future, by the choices that we make in our thoughts, speech, and actions. Because no matter how much of a crook some guy is, the head of this organization that runs, let's say, corporations and governments and things, whoever they might be, whoever they are, they can never really damage us as much as we can damage ourselves. Stalin, Mao Zedong, all these guys, Hitler, they were atrocious beings. And they've done some horrible, horrible things to millions of people. But the impact that one's own actions could have on oneself and their future is far greater than any Stalin, than any, head of a global forum type of a character might be, exercising over leaders, countries, you name it. Some dictator somewhere killing people. The individual doing their life, how are they living their life, has a far more poignant role to play in these decisions. And that's why my encouragement is to use this dynamic, this turmoil, this hurricane of events that have been happening, and they're growing exponentially. People are having panic attacks left and right, by the way. Healthy people. I know these people. They've been healthy as an ox. But now all of a sudden they just like, people are starting to crack, in a sense, psychologically, emotionally. So we need to first learn how to, what we use in the field of that psychotherapy, self-regulate. So please start to ground yourself, very first thing. Literally, grounding. What ground? Okay, the body. There's a point of contact between you and the ground. Typically, if you're standing or sitting, they're your sit bones or the feet, usually. Tap your feet a few times to the ground. Or lift your toes up in your shoes or whatever. Just lift them up and then place them back down. If you can curl those toes down to the ground as if you're grabbing hold of the ground. This is like a yoga technique that many of people use. Just to feel the ground beneath you. Because inducing fear in the populace, in people, creates obviously stress, anxiety, and the feeling that you are powerless. Okay? And you can't do anything about it. Okay, all that creates tremendous amount of strife and worry. Resentment comes back in. Fear grows. Now we have anger, but anger that you cannot show on anyone, but it needs to come out somehow. And if it can't, it implodes, and guess what? The person all of a sudden feels like they're about to faint. Heart palpitations, they get dizzy, blacked out all of a sudden. What's happening? It's the brain. It's being overloaded. The amygdala. It's called hijacking it. Like emotional brain is like your PFC, your prefrontal cortex, is completely offline. But one of the best ways to get the prefrontal cortex is the thing that makes us basically human. We can reason, we can rationalize, we can use common sense and ground ourselves. But it needs help. For it not to be hijacked, you need to ground yourself. So you can use, like Webu Sayadaw would have said, and obviously Lord Buddha, just bring your awareness around just this area. Okay, breathe. Don't try to control it. Slowly, slowly you ground yourself. Another one is the one I mentioned about feeling the bottom of your feet and things. Or how your body is touching. How's the sensation? So what you're doing is you're disassociating yourself intelligently, with wisdom, with responsibility. Disassociating from what? Not from yourself, but from these thoughts and fears and worries. Because they can really saturate your body, your life, in fact. Steal you from yourself. And that's one of the worst things you could do. One of the worst things we can do to ourselves. So my encouragement is to use these situations as opportunities. That's what the Buddhist message would be. In the face of all these things that are going on, all these terrible things that are slowly unfolding, as if by a plan, one after the other, from different angles. So my encouragement is not to be sucked into that. Be aware of it, of course. Use common sense. But ultimately, the thing that we do have control over, this is important, we do have control over something. No one can take that away from us, despite all the powers that they might possess. That one thing is the attitude. You can even end up being a slave in the 21st century, physically and all that. But many of us are and have been already slaves throughout life, but we weren't cognizant of it. So this situation can help expose that about ourselves in our attitudes towards life, towards things, towards the passions, towards the six senses, the things that we have used throughout life to delude ourselves with, as we say to ourselves, well, I don't need to practice meditation. I don't need to practice morality. I don't need to practice character building. A meditator is a person who develops their character to the ultimate level. No one can take that from you. The money, the power, external power that you've amassed, all are going to be taken away from you. Your physical beauty, your health, all will be taken away from you. That's the natural law of existence. Anicca, dukkha, anatta, the Buddha said. The three characteristics of existence. In any plane, in any existence, in any world. Impermanence, instability basically, unreliability, suffering, dissatisfaction, not being fulfilled, non-substantiality. There is no identity as such. I am so and so. These are my thoughts, these are my feelings, mine. Well, now it is. 5 seconds later, something else might happen. All of a sudden, it's like as if that didn't exist, because now you've developed some other attitude towards it. So let's be encouraged by the example of Venerable Tissa. Not necessarily to go ahead and break our legs, of course, that's not the message. But using the value of Sangvega, urgency, more so than ever, because we have to have it now. The world is assisting us to practice. So thank you, world. Thank you, all these people who are doing all these things, in a sense. That's the attitude that we need to have, because we don't have control over the external things, external freedoms, and we're losing them by the hour or minute. But that should not necessitate for us to give up what we really have and always have had the control over, and that is your mind and how it functions within yourself, in the choices you make between what is useful and what is not, between what is skillful and what is not, between what is empathetic and what is not, between what is kind and compassionate and loving, equanimous, helpful, and what is not. That mindset is the thing which will protect you from becoming one of those power-hungry characters. Because you could easily switch places with them, because they're functioning with the three defilements: greed, lust, anger, hatred, also the seeking of and after power, domination. There's a lot of anger and hatred and oppressive attitude in there. And delusion. Well, it's not happening to me. It's not happening to the people that are on my phone. The close people, Who cares if it's happening to 7.8 billion people over there? Well, you were there in previous lives, and guess what? You're going to be on the receiving end of far worse things that you're planning to do to others, even a single person. Even though now it doesn't look like that, because you feel you are literally untouchable. No one can touch you. And that gives that sense of, I'm omnipotent. It's funny because gods, Brahma gods, Maha-Brahma, if you go to India, people worship Maha-Brahma. Well, he has a time limit, he has a shelf life in a sense. Although they live for hundreds of billions of years, etc. they see many worlds come into being, and then so one of them was Baka. He was having a thought, wow, oh, look at me. I'm the God. I am it. I'm the most powerful. I'm the omniscient. I'm this, I'm this. Meanwhile, the Buddha was sitting under a tree. And the Buddha would scan early in the morning with his Buddha eye the whole entire galaxies and universes and the whole 3 different levels of existence. And he saw Baka having this thought. And he said, oh, somebody has to teach him a lesson. And who better than a Buddha? And he goes there and he shows him that his power, so-called omniscience, is not that much. And he's also subject to the rules that I mentioned, the 3 characteristics of existence. One of them being unreliable, his life being unfixed. Meaning that it runs out. He doesn't live forever and ever and ever, like he was thinking. And he's also subject to suffering, because pain, psychological pain, and the feeling of, oh my, I'm going to die one day, brought sadness to his heart. Being Mahabrahma, how could that happen? Well, it did. It does. Because he was full of it. Full of this conceit. Full of delusion that I am Mahabrahma. Entire galaxies and universes are subject to my will. And they are. That's the role of a high Mahabrahma. But it's a role. He will die from that position, and they will go like boom, 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 down the slopes, down the stairs, until somebody else comes who has those right merits, having done enough good deeds, this and that. That's why they will be reborn in that position of a Mahabrahma. But their credits will run out eventually, and they will fall. So these individuals who are in powerful positions on this planet are there because of, guess what? Good deeds they've done. They've done good deeds. That's why they're in such a wealthy, powerful position. But they are abusing it. And it always breaks my heart to see these wealthy world leaders or politicians or incredibly wealthy CEOs and people who basically rule the planet. And those behind the scenes, I don't know who they are. That they don't know what a great opportunity it is that they're missing. They're wasting. A person becomes part of a monarch. Like he was born into a monarchy. He never has to work ever again. They feed him with a golden spoon encrusted with diamonds. Everything before he even thinks about it, they give it to him or her. These people are wasting such a tremendous opportunity to change the world and themselves. Because that is a credit that they got because of good deeds they've done. They most probably have given food, for example, to a holy person. Maybe even a glass of water they've given to a bhikkhu who is an arahant, for example. Suddenly they are the king of the planet. Or a pope. Never has to work again. They treat him almost like a demigod. He was a nothing in a previous life. But he just felt compassion and kindness. And it's like, you know what, I'm just going to give this morsel of food to this old beggar. But that beggar used to be a saint, was a saint, let's say. So now they're enjoying that. Great! They're born in a healthy human body. Great! They're not using it. And because of that availability of resources, they are wasting another huge opportunity to change themselves, and especially to really maximize on that gift and make sure it keeps coming, because after a few years they're going to be dead and gone. And where they're going to end up opening their eyes next, it's not going to be pretty. The Buddha was very clear, and the Arahants will tell you exactly how that looks like, feels like, and it's a horrible place to be. In deep meditation, you get to see these places if you want. I've seen some. It's horrible. And I really feel pain for these individuals who are abusing their power, causing harm, and not using this valuable resource that they have now. So that is my encouragement. I guess it's a double prong for people to make the most of these difficult times, create this sense of urgency, and really work and excel in their practice to develop a deeper understanding of what the Buddha taught, to maximize on that, and also to these individuals in high places, I guess. I really doubt it will ever get to anyone like that. This conversation is being recorded. But if it does, I hope that somebody could turn things around for themselves at least, and make sure they keep on growing, because this life is very short on this planet. Despite all the beautiful things in this, Mother Earth could provide, it's very temporary, and it's nothing compared to the divine realms, celestial realms. Nothing. It's not even the boondocks. That's how bad this place is compared to divine realms. So they could really feel like gods, which they're desperately trying to feel like here, because they're suffering from the three defilements, especially the last one, delusion. So the Dhamma is the antidote to that never fails. So I will stop here. I know I've spoken a lot.